Alright guys, so welcome back to Cowboy Ranch Life. Today we're working on a 2005 Dodge pickup. It's a 1-ton pickup, it's a 3500 dually, and I was doing chores this morning and the caliper hyperextended and blew out, and on top of that my brake pads are gone, which is what caused the caliper to hyperextend and blow out. So we're going to see if we can't fix that, and we're kind of on a time limit here. We don't even have the parts gathered up yet, and I'm a little ways from town, but Cat, stay out. Anyway, we're gonna see if we can't get that done, and yeah, so we got a timeline. It's 12:30 now, and we've got to have this truck back on the road by about 2:30. So we're gonna see if we can't get that done. Justice is gonna be helping me some there. We're gonna video this, so hope you guys enjoy, and I better get the cat out of the way. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the tire off. Obviously, you got to take the wheel and tire off to get to the caliper, and this is gonna be kind of a quick how-to-do video as well. Alright guys, so before we start on this video, I wanted to mention that this video is educational purposes, and also the same caliper will fit, the same top premise, I shouldn't say the same top part, the same process will work on a lot of the Dodge pickups. Half tons, 3/4 tons, 1 tons, 5500, which is a 2-ton truck. Most of the Dodge pickups, calipers and rotors, it's all the same setup, just either a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So this should work even if you have a half-ton pickup. This is basically just a video on how to work and replace brakes and calipers on a Dodge pickup, period. Anyway, unless you have drum brakes, which that'd be on the back of the old trucks. But nonetheless, so one thing I wanted to mention is to always make sure you get plenty of brake fluid on ahead of the job, because you will lose some. So you always want to make sure you have plenty of brake fluid ahead. We use DOT3 brake fluid. You can kind of see that there, that's an older container. And you want to make sure, like this is slick and oily. It might not hurt to wipe that off a little bit, just so it doesn't get stuck mud and everything else in there. As you can see, we're really worried about that. Alright guys, so I'm using a 18mm ratchet wrench. That's what fits on here. I just tap it lightly with a hammer, and it'll all come loose. I already got the top one undone. They come out pretty easy once you go. You know, this is brake stuff. You're supposed to get tight, but you're not supposed to get it like putting a wheel on a semi, as my brother says. So, as you can see, that moves. So now, before I take that all the way off, you want to take your brake line off, just because of all the stuff you fight. Alright guys, so now we're going to take this bolt out here, which is your brake line bolt. It should have a copper washer on it, or a brass washer, whatever you want to call it, on it as well. I'm using a 5/8 bolt or wrench. That is not the right size, but shows you how loose I put it, because I didn't want to get it too tight. So I actually just used a 5/8 wrench. Then after that, we'll take pliers or whatever mechanism of use you choose and pop that loose from there. That's your brake line. Do not break that, because if you break that, then you have to replace your brake line, and that gets a little extensive, unfortunately. So now, after that, as you can see, I've undone my brake line. Always tie it up if at all possible. Put it somewhere. You can see I hooked it there. Pretty handy spot. You want to do that basically just because then you don't have ever a tendency of catching it on something on accident. Now, you will take that bottom bolt out. I don't tip my cup over and get oil everywhere. The cup was meant to catch the oil, but I think it's just meant now to be in the way. So now I'm taking the bottom bolt out. I've already cracked it loose, as I showed you guys. Just hold up on your brake caliper. It would seem to be easier if you took your top bolt out, but if you take your top bolt out, then it's hard to get, or you take your bottom bolt out first, then it's hard to get your top bolt undone. And so that's why it just is easier just to fight it and kind of work on it on the bottom one last. It does seem harder, but then you can't get your top one. So that's just something that I've learned. But you want to undo your brake line before you ever take your caliper off, because if you take your caliper off and then your brake line, that's the only thing holding on the truck, and you risk ripping your brake line, like I mentioned. So there's the two bolts out and the brake line bolt. Now you'll come up here and you can see that the caliper just comes right off. It's not tied to the truck in any way. As you can see, you can see the brake pads in here. One brake pad is completely shot, and the other one has just a little bit of padding left on it. That is the reason that this went out, is because the brake pad hyper-extended, because it had room to extend, so it extended, which caused these two barrels to push out too far, which then blew the seals, it looks like, in the left barrel, or it would be the bottom barrel, which would then cause it to start leaking, and pretty much goes from there. So you'll need to take this to your parts store. They charge a core on most parts stores. Most parts stores charge you a core on calipers, and that will be a pretty hefty core, so you want to take your old one out first. So with that said, let's go to the parts store. Alright, so here's the fun part. We got our caliper back and our brakes back. This is the brake pads I ended up going with, and we just went with a standard Napa caliper. Actually, warranty replaced that. If you've replaced these from your parts store that you are going and buying the replacement part back from, tell them that if this is like your second replacement, and that should be covered under warranty. Now that is only if you bought the first one off of them. So like I bought the first caliper off the Napa store, and it was a good caliper, but it did end up going out due to hyperextension, and I told them that, and they said it still is covered under warranty. So you might check that, because that's an expensive part. Nonetheless, so once you get your caliper, you'll pull the two bolts out there and there. That's going to take a 12mm wrench. Then this bracket here will come off. You'll put your two metal clips in, as you can see there, if that helps you at all. And the two metal clips, there's going to be a difference. And for you to understand that, the easiest way for me really to show you is right in there. You can see right there, my finger looks huge there. If you can see right there, it's going to be a longer point than up in there, which is hard to see, and I'll try to give a better example here. So there, if you can see both those in there, they're the exact same. On one side they're going to be the exact same, and on the other side there's going to be the longer one here and a stubbier part over there. This is kind of hard to see. I meant to take pictures and video this being put together, but honestly I forgot to do it and got a little ahead of myself. So nonetheless, after you put the metal clips in, then you push the brake pads and calipers. You put the brake pads in this bracket, and then you put this bracket on the caliper itself, and then bolt these two bolts back up, which should come pre-greased, and you should be ready to go. Then just make sure you extend your brake pads as wide as you can, and the reason for that being mainly because you want to make sure they fit over the rotor. That's something that you want to make sure, and the rotor is going to fit in here. Depending how wore your rotor is going to show you how much room there is in there. Nonetheless, so now that we've got that all put together, make sure, and the caliper should come with it, that little washer that was on the brake line, they give you a new one so it pushes in good. This is actually the kit that came with the caliper. They're black instead of the chrome clips down in there. The chrome ones come with the brake pads, and the black ones come with the caliper. Nonetheless, so that comes with that, and the brake pads, I believe they are the ones that came with, if I can dig it out here. There we go. They actually came with both of these washers, one for each side, because you can only buy brake pads in a set, which I'm going to go ahead and look on the other side, because if one side went out, probably the other side went out too, or is planning on it, and I don't want to have to accidentally ruin another caliper, which means a lot more work. So, nonetheless, that's what the deal is there, guys. So let's get to putting this back on, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, so we got it on. Tighten the 2 bolts as you saw. We'll make sure there's the copper washers on the bolt between the bolt head and the brake line, and then between the brake line and the caliper as well. Tighten that down, snug it. Then now we're going to bleed the brakes, because that'd be empty of brake fluid. So we're going to bleed the brakes, and then you check the brake fluid, and then you should be ready to roll. All right, guys, so we're going to start pumping the brakes and bleeding them. So I've got Justice in the cab. So what you do is you loosen your brake line. Justice, push it down. Push down. Then you see it squirt. So then you take it and you tighten it. So after you tighten it, now Justice lets up on the brakes. If you let up on the brakes with leaving this loose, you will pull air back into it, which then defeats the whole purpose. So Justice, get ready to push it down. Push it down. There's not much air, there's just a little bit left. So then, all right, now pull it up. Seems like a waste of brake fluid, but at the end of the day, do you want your brakes to work or not? So now we're gonna push it down a little bit, just enough. Justice, push it down. All right, and we just bled the brakes on a pickup. So there's how you bleed the brakes, and make sure your brake fluid capacity is full. And then Justice just let up on the brake deal. So now all we gotta do is put the tire on, and that's how you put caliper and new brake pads on a pickup. What do you think, Justice?
I think she's ready to roll.